Top of the morning and welcome to our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Coming up on the program today, Hamas denies Iran's claim that October 7 attack was revenge for commander's assassination. Leaders of Egypt and Jordan reject any efforts to displace Palestinians. At least 20 killed near hospitals in Khan Yunis as Israel forces focus efforts in southern Gaza. Thank you so much for joining us. Hamas has denied a claim by an elite wing of Iran's military that its October 7 attack on Israel was carried out in revenge for the assassination of a top Iranian commander nearly 4 years ago. The Iranian state news agency IRNA reported that Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps RGC spokesperson Ramadan Sharif claimed the Hamas attack against Israel was a response to the 2020 killing of the Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani in a U.S. airstrike. Iranian officials have previously denied any direct involvement in the attack, saying that despite Tehran's financial backing and support for Hamas and other proxy groups in the region, it does not direct any of their actions. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and King Abdullah of Jordan are against any efforts to displace Palestinians. They made this clear following a meeting in Cairo on Wednesday. The leaders convened at Al-Ittihadiyya Palace to discuss the situation in Gaza, where they also called for an urgent ceasefire to allow in critically needed humanitarian aid. They are asking, in their words, for a fair and comprehensive solution to the conflict, which they say should include the creation of an independent Palestinian state along the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. The meeting came just days after Egypt floated a new peace plan, which was rejected by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Israeli troops are working in several areas of Gaza, particularly around Al-Bureij and Khan Yunis, which it describes as a terror base for Hamas. Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari gave this information, explaining the army's current military exercise. Israeli forces pounded central Gaza by land, sea and air, and Palestinian authorities reported dozens more deaths, with the UN Health Agency saying thousands of people are trying to flee the fighting. Israel's military has reported the death of 3 more soldiers killed in action in Gaza. This brings the total military losses in the enclave to 166 since ground operations began on October the 20th. In this new southern campaign, Israeli strikes have killed dozens near the Al-Amal hospital in Khan Yunis. That's according to the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which reported the toll on Wednesday. The Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza reports at least 20 people killed in the airstrikes. It adds that over the past 24 hours, 195 people were killed and 325 others were injured. Israel's emergency minister, Benny Gantz, is warning Lebanon to stop Hezbollah attacks on northern Israel. In a televised address, Mr. Gantz says the stopwatch for a diplomatic solution is running out if the world and the Lebanese government don't act in order to prevent the firing on Israel's northern residents and to distance Hezbollah from the border. The IDF will do it. Security sources reveal that Hezbollah, an ally of Hamas in Gaza, had fired the most rockets and weaponized drones against Israel on Wednesday than it has done in a single day since the spate of daily clashes began. Israel's army has released videos of top military commanders meeting, as well as airstrikes on targets purported to belong to Hezbollah. In the first video, Israel's military chief Herzi Halevi is seen meeting a top commander to conduct situational assessments and approve plans for its northern command, which oversees operations on the Lebanese border. The second video shows airstrikes on targets said to belong to Hezbollah, which Israel's military identifies as military sites and infrastructure located in Lebanon. The Israeli army has released new videos of secret tunnels as well in Gaza. This one, released on Wednesday, purports to show tunnels discovered near a hospital and a school in Gaza. One of the heavily edited videos shows the entrance to a tunnel shaft near the Rantisi hospital. A statement shared by an Israeli army social media account says they had located and destroyed 3 tunnels. Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan is comparing the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Adolf Hitler, saying he is no different, and likened Israel's attacks on Gaza to the treatment of Jewish people by the Nazis. Speaking at an event in Ankara, Erdogan also repeated his criticism of Western support for Israel, adding that Turkey was ready to welcome academics and scientists who are facing persecution due to their views on the conflict in Gaza. He also says German officials cannot speak out against Israel actions because they are still paying the price for Hitler. Another edited video circulating on social media appears to show Palestinian men and at least 2 children detained and stripped by the Israeli Defense Forces in a stadium in northern Gaza. Clips in the video show what appeared to be 2 young boys in one frame, stripped down to their underwear, walking and holding both their hands up as the IDF directs them in the stadium. In another clip, 2 figures who appear to be the same young boys, stripped of their clothing, are seen with their hands above their heads as they are lined up in single file with other males who appear to be teens and adults. It's not been verified when the videos were shot. The IDF has not yet commented on the video. We now speak to our first guest, a national security risk strategist, as well as a former British police officer, Mr. Vince Onyekwelu. Mr. Onyekwelu is reaching us virtually from Anambra State in eastern Nigeria. You're welcome to the program. Compliments of the season to you.
Thank you. Compliments of the season. Good morning, Nigeria.
We must begin with the comments of the president of Turkey, Recep Erdogan. Is he turning history on its head by comparing Benjamin Netanyahu, a Jew, to Adolf Hitler, who massacred the Jews? And in the same breath, President Erdogan administration has not been void of blame in many cases in his own country concerning other ethnic groups.
Thank you so much. Obviously, most people of history that understand the person and the character and the professional called Mr. Erdogan would agree that he is a man who is larger than life. He is the type of character who is not scared to make his opinion known. However, he is entitled to his own opinion. If he wishes to compare Mr. Netanyahu to Mr. Hitler, that's his own cup of tea. If he wishes to compare any other person with another person, that's his own cup of tea. I respect his opinion. However, in that comparison, one will ask Mr. Erdogan, has he done enough for his region? Has he done enough for his own nation? A country whereby people are not free to speak up, a society where people are scared to make their freedom of opinion known because of the fear of the backlash that will come from Mr. Erdogan. It doesn't mean that Mr. Netanyahu is free to be criticized. Mr. Netanyahu has his own serious cup of tea. Obviously, in a society where there was 5 presidential elections in a period of 2 years, Mr. Netanyahu's persistence to be in power has also to be criticized. However, the bottom line here is we have 2 nations that seriously hate each other. That is the Palestinians and that is the Israelis. These are 2 nations that historically the world have not done enough to give Palestine the human rights that they deserve and to give Israelis the human rights that they deserve also. So I think it's not the best time for nations to criticize the PA, who is in charge of the Palestine Authority, Mr. Abbas, or to criticize Mr. Netanyahu. The bottom line is for the world to find a common ground for Mr. Abbas and Mr. Netanyahu to work a peace process that will be fair to the Palestinians and that will also be fair to the Israelis. I think that's my best opinion diplomatically. But trying to take side, I think that is wrong on Mr. Erdogan, because we all can take side, and especially when people take side not based on justice, not based on equity, but based on religious ideologies, that puts that person in a very precarious position. Thank you.
Well, Turkey and Israel's diplomatic relations couldn't be worse right now. Israel has since recalled its diplomatic envoy to Turkey, and Erdogan has publicly, consistently criticized Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know why this saying keeps coming to my mind: those that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. But let us turn our attention right now to the IRGC, Iran, who are claiming that the October 7 attack, as we reported this morning, was as a result of an assassination of a top commander of that corps by Israel, which Hamas denies. Is there trouble between the allies, that is between Iran and its proxy?
Yes, definitely. Iran, just like Lebanon, has strong interest in what's going on in Palestine. Now, we all understand that apart from Iran and Lebanon, there are other countries that are also interested. I'm talking about Arab countries that are interested in what's going on in Palestine. Some of them are having positive influence. Some of them are having negative influence. Some of them are having a more like a lukewarm interest. How do I mean? A country like Qatar obviously has a lukewarm interest, in my own opinion, because on one side, Qatar has been very upfront with financial support to the Palestinians. Qatar has been very upfront speaking with the Palestinian Authority and also speaking with the Israeli Authority. Qatar was one of the first nations that was able to collaborate with Palestinian Authority and also collaborate with the Israeli Authority to send aid to the civilians, the casualties of war in Gaza. On the other side, Qatar also happens to be the host of very top-ranking terrorist Hamas, because I need to include that word terrorist Hamas. Hamas is not just Hamas, it's a terrorist organization. So Qatar on the other side hosts one of the top leaders of Hamas in their country. But on the other side, a nation like Iran hasn't played the role Qatar has been playing. Iran has persistently been on the side of war, been on the side of making very strong statements that kind of tries to add fuel to the fire. Iran has always been on the side of Israel must go down. And that is not a very helpful statement, because no country has a right to say that another country must go down. And also on the side of Lebanon, Lebanon has a lukewarm stance, knowing fully well that Lebanon is controlled by one of the most powerful militia around that territory, being the Hezbollah. Of the physical entrenchment of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and because of the political power that Hezbollah commands and controls in Lebanon. So obviously, you wouldn't expect much from Iran, rather than taking that same religious, ideological stance against Israel. Just like I talked about Mr. Erdogan being seen to be taking a religious, ideological stance against Israel. We need to remove that religious ideologies so we can face facts and figures and find a consistent solution that will be fair on the Palestinians and that will be fair on the Israelis. Thank you.
Mr. Onyekwelu, you're a former British police officer, and Hamas has constituted appears to be a militia trained possibly by Iran and God knows who else. How far can they go with this fight against the IDF?
Honestly, in the security services, we have what we call the red mist. So the red mist is a situation whereby a criminal or even a law enforcement officer or anybody is so engulfed with their challenges that all they want is to get a part of flesh, or to get a revenge, or to show what they can do to the other person. So it's always advisable for one not to get involved in the red mist, because red mist is very dangerous. It may engulf you. It may make you to have so much hatred and so much angst within you to probably arrest a criminal, and then you put yourself in harm's way. You can also make a criminal or a terrorist organization to be so bent on getting revenge or to getting serious political or kind of social attack on a nation, and they will make mistakes. So basically, once you see an organized criminal gang, which I see Hamas as, with all due respect, we have to be very careful that what is going on amongst Hamas is being copied across the world by so many other terrorist organizations and organized criminal organizations. Hamas does not hold the authority in Palestine. Hamas only got authority about 2014, 2015 in that part of Gaza. Before then, Fatah, which is being ruled or controlled by Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestine, it's the same Fatah that is in charge of the West Bank. And you can see that we don't have the same kind of clash we have in Gaza in West Bank, because the Fatah are more moderate. They don't go for war. They don't make such terrible speeches. So obviously, we have to understand that we cannot allow terrorist organizations to start playing a role which they don't have, because that's the same similar thing we have in a place like Afghanistan, where we know a terrorist organization is in charge of the society. And development-wise, it's disgraceful what is going on in Palestine, because as much as I blame the Israelis for their own role, I also have questions to ask the Palestine. Whether you like it or not, there is so much freebies that the Palestinians have. You don't have access to water on your own. You have to depend on the Israelis to give you water. You don't have electricity on your own. You have to depend on Israelis to give you electricity. And when you compare that each year, the United Nations send 120 million US dollars to Gaza. Each year. Monthly, the United States of America send $130 million to Gaza. The European Union send about 80 million each to Gaza. And then Israelis also send millions in the way of electricity supply, water, and other things to Gaza. And in all this, what have they used these monies to do, that they still have to rely on the Israelis to supply them with water, which gives the Israelis the impetus to turn off water at a point. If you can have your own water, you don't need to wait for somebody to turn off their own water. So what I'm talking about is a level of self-reliance based on the incomes coming from the EU, United Nations, the USA, and other nations into Gaza. There should be better management and more accountability, so they can be more self-reliant and not relying on the Israelis to give them water, light, and all those basic amenities of life. Thank you.
Well, that's a lot to ponder. You just mentioned a few figures, a few facts and statistics that also begs the question. You call them an organized criminal gang. They call themselves, and other people as well, refer to them as freedom fighters. Some of these monies that you've mentioned obviously have been used to build the tunnel network and to prosecute their campaign against Israel. Are they freedom fighters, or are they an organized terror group?
In my opinion, and with all due respect, Hamas remains a terrorist, vile, wicked organization. If you call them organized crime, they are also an organized crime association, and they have international connectivity. If you ask yourself one or two questions, how many Palestinian refugees has Egypt accepted to take lately? How many Palestinian refugees has Mr. Erdogan of Turkey accepted to take? How many Palestinian refugees does Iran take? Now, when you talk about terror, do not forget that terror has got different categories. You have a terrorist who is a frontline fighter, who bears dangerous arms, who understands warfare. That's the terrorist. You also have a terrorist who is a financial sponsor, who helps to get funds from one point to one B, either to buy military cache or to buy munitions or to get training to train the men on the front line. That is also a terrorist. You also have people that are sleeping cells. They could be women, they could be a woman, it could be a medical doctor, an engineer who is working in a professional global organization and gets information across to the consultant, to the strategist. That person is also a terrorist. You could even get a bus conductor, a bus driver, a laborer who goes across to Israel, who goes across other nations outside Palestine and Israel to find what you call the red market, to get illegal munitions or to find red money, that they can find the right banking channel, banking tunnels, banking pipelines to make these monies go across the world for the benefit of the terrorist organization. That person is also a terrorist. You can even find the under 18-year-old boy who is willing, who is ready to be recruited, but for one or two reasons, maybe for parents or for friends, he has not been able to get recruitment, and he is willing to die. He is willing to give information to the terrorist. That is also a terrorist. And when you arrest any of these persons, they will make you believe that, oh, I'm a medical doctor, I'm an engineer. Because if you look at the medical leader of that hospital that was making press reviews, he's currently been arrested. Obviously, I understand that he has connections to Europe. I understand that he has family ties to the UK. He's a medical consultant, and he's in charge of that major hospital in Gaza. We all knew his stand, but suddenly there are new tunnels being found in different Francisa hospital, other hospitals around that place. Obviously, though he's a medical doctor, he can be sympathetic. He can still be a loyalist. So the web of who is a terrorist is not just the person who bears arms in the front line. There are sleeping cells, there are financial sponsors, there are international allies that go across the world looking for trainers, looking for war materials, looking for ammunition across the world to direct. There are even bankers, there are engineers who teach them how to build all those kind of techniques. So it's a very broad chain of web. Thank you.
One word, or one name rather, comes to mind: Osama bin Laden. But we have to leave it there, and we thank you for your insight and contributions this morning. 12 weeks into this war, we pray for a peaceful outcome. Thank you, Mr. Vincent Yekolu, who's a former British police officer, national risk strategist, joined us from Anambra State. Compliments of the season.
Same to you, bro. Take care.
Welcome back to our special coverage of Israel-Hamas war. World Health Organization Director General is concerned that a resolution passed by the United Nations Security Council last week has yet to have an impact. The UN resolution approved last Friday calls for humanitarian pauses between Israel and Hamas, increased aid to Gaza, and the creation of conditions that will allow for a sustainable end to fighting, ending days of closed-door negotiations. In a post on X on Wednesday, the World Health Organization chief says UN Security Council members must urgently turn their recent resolution to create pauses in hostilities and humanitarian corridors into reality in Gaza. Actions, not words, are what Gazan people need today. Israel is blaming Hamas and the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, for the prevention of humanitarian aid from reaching people in Gaza. Asked about bodies of Palestinians that Israel had reportedly returned to Gaza, the Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy affirmed that bodies have been transported to Israel for an identification procedure as part of efforts to locate the hostages and the missing persons. Gaza authorities were trying to figure out when and where the men were killed and who they are. He also alluded to tension on the northern front with Hezbollah.
During the war, bodies have been transported to Israel for an identification procedure as part of our effort to locate the hostages and the missing persons. The difficulties in identifying those murdered make it necessary to transfer the bodies to Israel for forensic identification. The process of examining the bodies coming from the Gaza Strip is a routine analysis that complies with internationally accepted forensic standards, ruling out their identification as Israeli hostages abducted on October 7th. Time is running out for the 129 hostages in the Hamas terror dungeons since 10/7. In fact, time has already run out for the 22 of them Hamas has already murdered and is holding their bodies hostage. UN agencies are currently struggling to distribute aid at the pace that Israel is inspecting it. That's why yesterday the Kerem Shalom crossing was closed at the request of the United Nations due to logistical constraints on the Gazan side of the crossing, and we hope that the UN will now do a better job of clearing that backlog. Unfortunately, to date, the UN aid mechanism in Gaza has been woefully unsuccessful because it goes through UNRWA. Aid simply isn't reaching the people who need it because Hamas hijacks it and UNRWA covers up for it. Despite our severe warnings, Hezbollah continues its unprovoked aggression against Israeli territory. We are now at a fork in the road. Either Hezbollah backs off from the Israeli border in line with UN Resolution 1701 from 2006, or we will push it away ourselves.
Now we speak to Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu. Ambassador Ayalogu is speaking virtually from London in the UK. Good morning, compliments of the season, and welcome to the program.
Well, good morning. Compliments of the season to you too and the team.
We wish the Middle East was having a good season, but obviously that's a far-fetched dream, a pipe dream at this point, especially because of Hamas and Israel. Let's begin, Ambassador, if you will, with the situation concerning the hostages. Prior to this, or after this, the Antonio Guterres says that, Secretary General of the United Nations, said that what happened was commendable. What happened on October the 7th was condemnable, I beg your pardon, was condemnable, and he condemned it in no uncertain terms, the actions of Hamas. But he went on to say as well that these things didn't happen in a vacuum. Of course, that got Israel's knickers all up in a twist, and they called for his resignation. They said he was non-neutral. How dare he say that he was supporting Hamas, according to them. But is the Middle East sitting on a keg of gunpowder now because of these hostages? Remember, Ambassador, virtually every family in Israel has members of the IDF, the army, or former members. And many of the senior ranking officials or some of the senior ranking officials have family members, sons, daughters who are serving right now in Gaza. And some of them possibly have relatives and children who have been kidnapped and taken hostage. So do you see this as a generational crisis if it's not nipped in the bud now?
Well, yes, of course. It's always been a generational crisis anyway, considering that it has stretched since 1948 or so up to date, and that would be about 2 or 3 generations, and there is no end to it because the seeds of discord that has been there are still there and doesn't seem to be going away. In fact, seem to be breeding new discontent. You asked whether the region is still on a keg of gunpowder, and I would say yes, because largely we do not see any easy solution as we speak. Both sides are entrenched in what they want to do or what they're doing. The hostages have not been released. We haven't seen serious declarations of a two-state policy by the Palestinians. the Israelis feel that they have an existential situation here, what to deal with, and that the way to deal with it is to exterminate, if I use the word the way they do it, the Hamas terrorism or terrorists, which is quite a large group, and which cannot be easily done because these terrorists are embedded in around civilian population, children, women, and so far. The effort to bombard to fish out the Hamas soldiers wherever they are have led to over 20,000 civilians dead, and everybody is watching while we find the October 7th situation condemnable, and probably think that for a while that some kind of punishment was in order. But gradually, the whole world is beginning to feel that the punishment has become extra heavy-handed and that is getting too much, and that some of the global values of respect for humanity, human rights, and all that is being impugned by Israeli action. So it continues. We don't see an end to it as we stand.
Is there a danger? Yeah, please go on, sir. Go on, Ambassador. Go on, please.
No, and there is a likelihood that people who were sitting on the fence watching, especially the people in the Middle East, these countries that have either kept quiet or even played ombudsman or interlocutors, would begin to get tired and probably feel that somehow the current aggressor now, which is Israel, might need to be called to order or restrained. And who knows, that can lead to certain actions, physical actions from them. These are some of the dangers.
What are the implications of Israel ignoring the UN resolutions?
Well, the implications is that you set a bad example. That's one, because the UN is supposed to monitor and enhance global peace and security, and it does so through these resolutions and adjudication. And any country that chooses to ignore it, and Israel would not be the first to do that, sets a bad example. And you find others doing it and making reference to in the past, people have done that and nothing had happened. So that is one danger that I worry about as somebody who is very seriously, whose life has been spent in monitoring global peace, attempts to restore global peace, especially since after the Second World War. It's a dangerous trend. And of course, on ground, it means that they will continue doing what they are doing, and we don't know where that will end. It will, there might be some. It is likely, we cannot rule that out, that the current state of accommodation of Israeli effort to punish the Hamas will lead to some groups or some countries say, no, that is enough. You have to stop. And if you don't stop, we will try to stop you. I don't know whether that is a possibility, but that is it.
And do you foresee the Committee of Nations sanctioning Israel as they did to Russia? All the sanctions targeting Israeli businesses and corporations, targeting Jews around the world, targeting Jewish businesses, and sanctioning Israel economically. Is this a possibility?
There is a possibility. In fact, we might be looking at that much sooner than later as a way to go, because it's really difficult to sit back and watch one country turn the whole global system of peace and security and respect for human rights and all that on its head. So that I wouldn't be surprised. Come to think of it, we should be thinking of that right now as a way to put an end to all this.
And if that happens, that means that Israel will go the way of Russia, who have totally ignored every UN resolution against the invasion of Ukraine and who continue in that war against Ukraine.
Yes, quite possibly, and I am sure they will receive some support from the countries that seem to have made it a point to always support Israel, which is quite many countries. But that will be unfortunate. I am personally more involved or more interested in seeing global peace restored and the concept of law and order continue. That the concept of law will continue to be a guiding light.
Speaking of turning things on its head, which you just mentioned, that's how I described President Erdogan criticizing Prime Minister Netanyahu and likening him to Adolf Hitler, comparing Prime Minister Netanyahu to Adolf Hitler. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, these are some of the possible spin-off from an attempt by Israeli to remain entrenched in their current effort to decimate Hamas, irregardless of the huge collateral damage. They can be called anything, and these are the precursors to further action.
The hostages have, in the eyes of the world and in the eyes of supporters of the Palestinians and those in Gaza, and in the eyes of those who support Hamas as it's constituted and the actions that it takes, are the hostages expendable? Are the lives of the hostages expendable? That's how it appears. They should just die away because Israel is bombarding Gaza. The hostages should die. No one talks about the hostages. That no one is. They talk about the hostages, but not with the same fervor that they talk about the suffering in Gaza.
Well, when it all started, there was very serious concern about the fate of the hostages. And clearly nobody wants anybody to die. But as time have gone on, and from the other side, that's Israel, they have accounted for over 20,000, probably more, probably slightly less, human souls, who nobody also wants to have been killed, but they have seen that happen through the actions of the country. We begin to wonder, should we worry too much about the face of the hostages? But then, definitely, as we know that some of the hostages, or most of them, are still alive somewhere, we all hope that somehow they should all be released, even though their numbers really come very little compared to the so many that have died. Bottom line is that nobody needs to be killed at all, and the hostages should be released, must be released, and furthermore, Israel must reconsider its current efforts to push out the Hamas terrorists and disregard any number of lives it takes to do that.
So what do you make, therefore, of the reactions of some of the United Nations itself, and some arms of the United Nations who Israel have criticized vehemently over how they responded to the October 7 attack? the UNICEF, United Nations Children's Emergency Fund, have not been so vociferous in condemning the attack, which had a lot to do with killing of children and taking of children hostage. UN Women, who didn't come out until 2 months after the October 7 attack to make a formal condemnation of the October 7 attack, that seemed to support the premise that the United Nations was against Israel because there was not that much animosity, or no, that's not the word, there was not that much condemnation of the October 7 attack by Hamas.
Well, personally, I consider these small matters. I treat the UNICEF and all the UN agencies are actually agencies of UN. So when UN at the General Assembly or the UN General Secretary had done that condemnation, that should suffice. If we go to pick on various smaller groups, agencies of the UN, that doesn't get us anywhere either way. Even if UNICEF condemned it, so what?
Beyond condemnation, Ambassador, to take action, call for resolution, call for conferences with the equal fervor with which Israel is criticized for their actions in Gaza and the terrible situation that's happening there. It seems that there's no balance. Well,
anybody can put up that argument and it might hold, but somehow it's not. It's gone beyond condemnation and even action, or even trying to balance anything. The issue now is how do we separate the warring parties? One of them is very powerful and can do all sorts of damage and has been doing so, and doesn't want to stop until he sees that the opponent is completely down and out. That's the bottom line for Israel, and so on. So we are in real serious difficulty because of the consequences of the continuation of this crisis. Potential continuation, the bad feelings, the further weaponization of the region. Probably we don't know how far it will extend. So definitely, that's one reason why there ought to be a solution.
We look forward to that solution. We anticipate it. We pray that it happens sooner rather than later. And we thank you for making out the time to be with us on the program this morning. We thank you, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland, who joined us from London.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for staying with us. In a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, French President Emmanuel Macron expressed his deepest concern at the very heavy civilian toll and what he calls the absolute humanitarian emergency facing the civilian population of Gaza. According to an Elysee Palace readout of the Wednesday call, he told Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel's imperative to protect civilians and the urgency of delivering the necessary aid to the people of Gaza. He also stressed the need to work towards a lasting ceasefire with the help of all regional and international partners. President Macron gave the assurance that France will be working with Jordan in the coming days to carry out humanitarian operations in Gaza. The French president also explained to Prime Minister Netanyahu the priority of the release of all hostages in the Strip, including 3 French nationals. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says his country is open to a new Red Sea mission, but not in favor of using the EU's Operation Atalanta there. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin had announced plans to set up a multinational coalition to safeguard Red Sea shipping last week. The effort is called Operation Prosperity Guardian. Operation Atalanta, set up by European Union Naval Force Somalia, operates off the Horn of Africa and in the Western Indian Ocean to support UN resolutions to protect the seas from piracy. Its headquarters is in Spain. Finally, an international team of surgeons toured in an overcrowded hospital. Well, before we go to the final story, an international team of surgeons toured an overcrowded hospital in Khan Yunis as they arrived in Gaza to help medical staff before complex surgeries. The envoy, which has representatives from Rama Worldwide, a non-profit Islamic charity organization based in the U.S., includes 6 surgeons. A spokesperson for the group, Akram Moshtani, says doctors worldwide are ready to come to the besieged strip to help, especially those who can perform surgery, but they need to be allowed in. An emergency medical team coordinator from the World Health Organization says only 20% of hospitals in Gaza Strip remain functional, and they are all overloaded. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, a total of 21,110 Palestinians have been killed and 55,243 injured in Israeli strikes in Gaza since October the 7th. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society has released footage showing its medical personnel treating injured Gazans, including children, in Jabalia, home to the enclave's largest refugee camp. Posting on X, PRCs called its volunteers humanitarian heroes and said the medical post in Jabalia is the last provider of medical services for citizens in northern Gaza after all hospitals have gone out of service. Nearly all the enclave's 2.3 million people have been driven from their homes, many several times. Finally, an Israeli military reservist was killed in the Gaza Strip just weeks after he successfully auditioned on a TV show that picks the country's entry for the Eurovision Song Contest. 26-year-old Shaul Greenglick performed on Israel's Rising Star in December 3rd while on furlough from his mobilization in the war against Hamas. Dressed in army fatigues and lieutenant stripes, he sang a popular ballad and was greenlit for the next round in the selection process. That was a yes. One of the judges says he'd dropped out of the show because of his duties in the infantry reserves. The funeral for Mr. Greenglick was held on Wednesday in Israel. Family members and friends wept while listening to a song recorded by Greenglick and his sister. The war between Israel and Hamas in its 3rd month, entering its 12th week. That's it for the coverage this morning. Thank you for watching. I'm Alumni Macaulay. Have a good day and compliments of the season.